Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. Special Skype interview with Sam Ronan, who is running for Congress. I've been wanting to have Sam on the show. Sam, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
You interviewed me for your podcast, and I've been wanting to return the favor for a while. So I'm really excited to do this because you announced your candidacy a couple months ago.
Yeah, I first announced my bid for Congress in June, and then I made a second announcement that I was switching my party affiliation to Republican to match with the gerrymandered district.
So let's get right into that, because I think that was the big question with a lot of the sort of progressives that follow me on this show, and many of them, of course, have come over from Jimmy Dore's show. You've been on that show. You've been on Aggressive Progressive. The big question was, why did you go from Democrat to Republican? Because remember, when I would talk to you on your show, I was kind of saying, and I have been saying for a while, but like, I don't know that I have a lot of faith in the Democratic Party, and maybe we just need to start a third party. And you were very much hey, change needs to come from within.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us why you went from Democrat to Republican.
So, I like to sell out. I found a dollar on the ground. No, seriously, I still stand by a Dem enter strategy. I also stand by a third-party strategy. I have been saying, even when I was running for the DNC chair, that if we were going to rebrand and rebuild the party, the Democratic Party, we most likely would have to run in Republican primaries as Republicans, but on our platform, and to show that it's the message that matters the most. And so I would be remiss if I didn't follow through with my own, so to speak, call to arms. And so that's largely why I chose, instead of running as a Democrat, to go with Republican. The district is in, the incumbent won by 60 to 40, right? He won by 20 points last year. Now, they say it's only a +5 or +6 district, but when the man doesn't even bother debating the Democratic nominee or bother really campaigning that hard at all in the district and still wins by 20 points, that tells you everything you need to know about the district. And so running as a Republican, to me, just makes sense. The other funny thing is, people don't know this, I guess, but I had every intention of running as a Republican when I first left the military anyway, simply because white, male, veteran. If that doesn't spell easy access to the Republican Party, I really don't know what does. So it's kind of come full circle politically for me. Now, I think the bigger question is, all right, fine, we can maybe buy the strategy, right? For the most part, I think the progressive community is more and more on board with, you know what? The Democrats really have no interest in changing. They gave us 60% less super delegates, and we're still taking corporate money. So a lot of the progressives, they're thinking, maybe we really should be thinking more outside the box where it's possible. Of course, California, Florida, to a degree, Massachusetts, New York, those are Democratic strongholds. You're just, the likelihood of you being able to run other than Democrat is pretty slim. That being said, what about my platform? Samuel Ronan, are you selling out? Are you now supporting Trump and wearing your MAGA hat and patting Paul Ryan on the back? No. The short answer is no. When I go canvassing, though, I realize that terminology and phrasing is very important. We can talk about universal health care and universal education because you and I understand that. We're on the same page when we talk about it. But if I go to a typical Republican, whether there's an R next to my name or not, and I say universal health care, there's this stigma instantly applied to it. And even if we talk about populism, populism has a stigma. So you know what? Have I had to actually say the words, make America great again, while on the doors? And the answer is yes. Same way as we talk about grassroots and progressivism when we're talking to liberals or possibly even independents. It's about reaching the constituency in the way they understand the language. We're still talking about the same thing, political reform. We're still talking about fight for 15, clean energy, better health care, better education, so on and so forth. It's just we're using the words that they understand. And I don't know how many people really believe me, I guess, but my website hasn't changed. I mean, the color changed a little bit, I guess. It went from all sorts of different colors to red, white, and blue. But, the platform's still there. You can still look at it. The math is still there. Still all about legalization of marijuana. Still want to make sure that you're not in debt just for getting, medical treatment or going to college. So the issues, interestingly enough, resonate with the district, which is why I stuck with them, which is why I don't feel bad for switching from one party affiliation to the other. Because the uninformed voter is who we have to cater to. Whether we choose to agree with that or not, the uninformed voter is who decides the fate of the country.
Well,
and
that's an excellent point. And I remember working on an open primaries campaign in South Dakota, and if that's a largely red state, and if you said anything, and you could get people to agree with all these things, but then if they found out you had a D next to your name, they wouldn't listen to you, and vice versa too. In blue states, like you can have great progressive policy, but if you have an R next to your name in California, they're just not going to listen to you. So I really understand that, and I understand that point. My question is, when you're canvassing, have you been asked, like, oh, so then you support Trump, or has that been a question been brought up, and how do you answer that question?
I tell you what, and this might sound a certain way, so I'm just prefacing it with, I'm getting signatures right now. All I'm looking for is to get signatures so I can be on a ballot. The question has been brought up quite often, actually, and I try and answer it by not answering it. I say, I understand why people voted for Trump, but I understand what his appeal to you might be, and I can assure you that I want to bring that level of populism and change to the Congress and to the federal government. So I avoid saying I support Trump. Now, if they push, do you support Trump? I say no, I don't support many of the things that he's done. I do, however, support his follow-through with shaking things up, and I do intend to follow through with that. It's the closest thing I can do to, I guess, pander without really just selling my soul. But I'm not lying either, because, I think we can all agree Trump is succeeding in shaking things up. He's just doing it as if he was a fascist dictator, which, well, that's what he's portraying himself as, and that's unacceptable. However, people see it as change, any sort of change, whether it's good or bad, it's different than what was before, and that's another reason why, as much as I want to rail against that machine, I have to understand that people aren't being cruel and cold, right, when they say they support Trump. Because when they say they support Trump, they support political reform. They support the change that's occurring. They might not understand that it's actually hurting them, but they understand that something is happening. And I have to respect that, especially if I want to, get on the ballot and try and represent them. No, I think what will be really interesting is if Steve Chabot, who's the incumbent, and I actually get a chance to debate. Because then I will have no choice but to really push him into a corner as a Trump supporter and differentiate myself as someone who wants to reform.
Right, and I think I remember when we spoke over the summer, one of the things that that you pointed out, you were, as a vet, were offended that Trump made fun of a Gold Star family, and so you have that as a vet. You have that, like, you can't, no one can take that away from you, and that's something that obviously gets a lot of traction all over America, but especially in a red district. So my question then is, so the goal is to get the signatures and then to go up against this incumbent and to show that you can be a progressive and a Republican. So if they push you to like, well, let me ask you this. So where do you stand on the sort of typical Republican issues of abortion and gun control?
See, and that's the funniest thing. When I was running for state representative and I would say I'm pro-choice, and then they're like, really? I thought you were a Republican. I said, no, I'm a Democrat. That's when the door slammed. Now, when I say I'm pro-choice, and they're like, I thought you were a Republican, I said I am. What is a better use of freedom, or what's a better description of freedom? The government telling you what to do with your body or denying you access to care, or you having the freedom and liberty to make a choice based on your faith in God, your doctor, and yourself. And when I put it into those terms, it kind of clicks a light bulb. It's like, oh, that's what you mean. Pro choosing whether or not it's a moral a moral, what's the word I want to use here? That you can morally accept the consequences of that particular action. And when you talk about it in those terms, again, trying to reach people on their level, it makes sense. And it's no longer such a controversial stance, even among Republicans. They're like, you know what? I still disagree with you. I still think, life begins at its conception. But you're right. We are a free country with freedom of religion and choice and this, that, and the other. And I respect you wanting to at least do your part as a legislator to make that open to those who don't believe as I believe. So it's interesting when I can get to that point. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but I am saying it's better than the 100% failure. I'm like around 50-50, 60-40 of being able to get people to listen. Now, as for gun control, in some ways, I think I'm even further to the right than most conservatives would even consider themselves, because I don't care what kind of gun you have. You can have an RPG for all I care. You want to roll around in a tank? You have at it. If you can afford it and you have the license and there's a range to go blow things up at, go right ahead. It's the exact instant you misuse that firearm or that weapon or that tank that it becomes a problem. So my thing as a veteran, I deal with weapons on the daily, right? That's my livelihood. Security force is armed. They're usually strapped with M4s and a handgun and at least 120 rounds at all times. And they man the gate. They come lean over. They have their weapon at port arms. I feel safe. I have no concerns whatsoever. But a uniformed cop in the civilian world comes to my door saying I was speeding. I am actually a little bit nervous, because not because I am in particular fear of my life, but we've seen cops get away with less or get away with more for less. So for me, it's about holding people accountable. There should be mandatory use of force training, and that should be a standard across the country, that this is the use of force. And if you violate the use of force, as in, say you do have somebody that has a gun and they're waving it around, you don't kill them. You don't. You tell them to put down the weapon or give it to you or to stop or do something, right? And then you move on to stunning, tasers, pepper spray, pellet guns even. But you don't go immediately to lethal force. And I think because I stand more on the escalating use of force training as a mandatory requirement in order to own any firearm, and then that counts as your license, that puts me, I would say, in a different realm altogether. Because with the Second Amendment, people just want, no, I want my guns. It's like, have your guns. But I want people to be responsible with them. And the best way to do that is in force training. Now, that's just civilians, right? The standard civilian, you, me, whatever. We have our gun. We're walking around. There's a bad guy, and we say, you need to put down your weapon or I will fire. And, shoot to disable, shoot to disarm, whatever. Shoot to kill if they're pointing at you, of course. But that's escalated use of force. You've tried to de-escalate the situation. Escalates, you do the thing. Law enforcement, on the other hand, though, they should be treated the exact same as the military. If you discharge your weapon and there is not overwhelming evidence that your life was in imminent danger, you have committed murder. And because you're trained and because you know better and because you don't have the excuse. I think if we can implement that in our law enforcement and our society, we would see gun violence drop perceptibly in a very short amount of time.
But what about like the people that are buying all these weapons online and then that are linked to the mass shooting? Like a lot of the mass shooters, their weapons were purchased legally at some capacity, and then how do you address that? Because what you just talked about was law enforcement, which I agree a lot of what you said with the law enforcement, but then how would you agree with people who are like, well, there's just too many guns on the street? Because like Chicago is always used as an example. Oh, Chicago has all the strictest gun laws, but look at all the gun violence. Well, it's easy because every illegal gun was a legal gun initially. I can in California has strict gun laws. I can drive into Arizona or Nevada, buy a bunch of guns legally, say they were stolen out of my car, file down the serial numbers, and sell them on the street here in L.A. for 4 times the cost. So how do we address that?
So that's the $1 million question, because that's not something you can combat. You can't combat illegality by passing laws to make illegal activity more illegal, right? Just like the war on drugs. You want to solve the drug problem in the United States, you legalize addiction, and you treat addiction as the medical problem it is, and then you'll see an overall decline of drug use. Legalize marijuana, you see a decrease in cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine use. Same thing with gun control. If you continue to make guns or certain types of guns or certain magazine sizes or bump stock or this, that, and the other illegal, you're not addressing the root problem, which is the mentally handicapped, the deranged, the evil, the cruel, the people who should not have weapons are having access to them. And if you can police people, if you can ensure that people are actually getting access to their weaponry lawfully, you can then dedicate resources to getting unlawful weapons off the streets. Now, that being said, how do you get illegal weapons off the streets since they're already illegal? Well, you have two issues. One, they're illegal weapons, and they're still weapons, meaning people are going to use said illegal weapons to prevent you from taking them back. So you are now endangering law enforcement and engaging in their actual duty, which is to ensure public safety. Unfortunately, that is the only method. The only way to get illegal weapons off the streets is to take them and to take measures to remove them.
Well, hold on.
And
they've done buyback programs that have worked. In Australia, they had mass shootings in the 90s in Tasmania, and the overwhelming support of the populace was, we don't want these guns anymore, so they outlawed them. They gave a buyback program, and they got the majority of them off the streets, and they've had a drastic reduction in gun violence and suicides and all this other stuff over the last 20 years. So the idea, to me, I just flat out don't agree that the only way to go get illegal guns off the streets is to go kick in people's doors and now you're in a crazy gunfight. Because if you do buyback, and cities and states in America have done this with a fair amount of success. So that to me feels like, it just sounds like...
Let's discuss that, because I've heard of the buyback program. I just wasn't, maybe I'm too pessimistic, and that's funny because I'm the younger one of us. I should be less jaded, right? I am all for buyback programs. I'm all for any alternative means that isn't violence in order to get illegal weapons off the streets. To me, though, there would have to be a few more steps in place to encourage people to even give up their weapons in the first place, because the vast majority of people who acquire these guns unlawfully, right? Now, in the case of the Texas church shooter, that was the Air Force dropping the ball and not filing the paperwork that showed that he was mentally handicapped, or not mentally handicapped, that he was abusive and that he spent time in prison for violence. He shouldn't have had access to weapons, and there was documentation that just never got pushed through. But the buyback program, the only way a gang member, the only way a criminal would really feel secure in turning in that weapon is if they knew they could turn in that weapon, do that good thing, that good deed, and not face other forms of reprisal, right? Because if they already have warrants out for their arrest, they're not going to walk up to a cop and say, well, here's my M16, SIG 90, and a caliber handgun. Here you go. They're not going to do that, because then they're just going to turn right around and get arrested. Secondly,
but they've done that, but they've had that though. They've had just like anonymously just drop the gun off, and they have done those. I think is that what you're suggesting we should do?
Yeah,
of course.
That's what I would say. Is if we're going to do anonymity and encourage that, I think it would be far more successful, of course, than just kicking doors down and taking weapons. I'm wary that would be what happens. I agree that it has happened in singular occasions across our country. I think if we could implement that at the federal level, since I'm running for Congress, or maybe at the state level, if I could encourage Governor Kasich or whoever takes his place to implement such a program, I think that would certainly be a good way of doing it. And thank you for bringing it up, because you're right, I wasn't thinking of that, and I do apologize. I'm not advocating for a violent overthrow or anything like that.
Okay, so let's then So the goal, obviously, so you got to get a certain number of signatures. Walk us through the timeline, the number of signatures, and then the date, and then what the next process is.
Yeah. So what a lot of people don't understand is that in order to get on the ballot, it's more than just saying, hi, I'm going to run. Each state has its own process. In the state of Ohio, if you run for Congress, you need 50 signatures from your party if you're going to run in a primary, or you need 5% of the governor vote in your district if you're going to run as an independent. So as you can imagine, 3,000 versus 50. So I'm going around gathering 50 signatures. Now, you can also submit up to 3 times as many. So I'm going around gathering 150 signatures. I will verify them with the Board of Elections, and then I'll submit them, and then I'll be on the ballot. I have until mid-January, really, because then they're going to process it and go through all that, fun stuff. And I don't want to, fall victim to bureaucracy. So my goal is to have 150 signatures by either this weekend or the end of next weekend, and then start the validation process. Now, I have to have them in by February 1st. They have to be submitted by then, because that is when the primary process begins. And then I have 3 months to run my campaign, so to speak, with signs, with door-to-door canvassing, with all that good stuff. That's when you're lawfully allowed to place and do all that kind of thing. Then in May 8th or 7th, whatever that Tuesday is when the primary election actually is. And I have until May 8th to get as much resources, as many volunteers, phone bankers, door knockers, what have you, recognition, notoriety in the district as I can until May 8th. Hopefully, I can finagle a debate or two out of the incumbent, because I am a direct challenger. He can't simply dismiss me because he's the other party and whatever, I'm going to just do whatever I want. I am a challenger. I have the right, if not the authority, to challenge him and be heard on that stage. So we're hoping to pull that off.
Okay. So are there any other, are you aware of any other Republicans that are going to be running in this district in the primary?
Well, just like the Democratic Party tries to instill loyalty among its membership, the same is true for Republicans. And in fact, I've had a few people not sign my petition simply because I said I'm going to challenge the incumbent. Didn't even say the guy's name. I just said the incumbent. And they're like, no, I'm not about that. Wow. So I would imagine, unless he is as unpopular or he falls victim to some of this sexual harassment scandal that's tearing through Congress, I don't foresee any other challengers, which is good for me because I don't have to worry about one guy.
So then, okay, have you how much, what is your sort of just ballpark percentage of people that are resistant to what you're trying to do because they're just like, hey, I'm a party loyalist, don't challenge the incumbent, versus the people that are like, yeah, man, go shake it up?
I'd say it's in that term, so loyalists versus those who are shaking it up. I'd say it's a good 10 or 20 to 80, 90 split. Like it's a really good split, just like we see across the country. Party affiliation and loyalty is at an all-time low, a historic low, right. Which means, okay, 25 or 30, up to 30% of the populace is a registered Republican. That means 70% isn't. Likewise, 20 to 30% is a registered Democrat, meaning 70% are not. Meaning no matter what I do, I have to cater my message to the 70%. And if I can do that, and I have been, and it resonates, it does, I can win. Now, the problem is, of course, that saturation, that reach. I don't have the time to knock on, 500,000 doors or 250,000 doors, whatever it is. I know because I found out I can peak at 8,000 a week. That's if I quit my job and decide to put literal holes in my shoes. That being said, the people that I have reached, the people that I've talked to, I have actually ran across the most apathy. I don't care about politics, not my dig. Even in the veterans associations, like the VFWs, that no, I'm not registered to vote. I don't care. I don't sign things. I'm like, I don't understand where this is coming from. But that is actually the bigger hurdle. Yeah, just getting on the ballot would give me a 50-50 chance of winning, right? Oh, I've seen this name 1,000 times. Oh, let's try this other guy. Why not? Or if my name happens to be above his, right? Because Steve versus Sam, if that's how they alphabetically organize it, oh, I'll vote for the top one. Like, it is silly as all get out, and I'm not even saying this to be funny or sarcastic, but elections have been won from less. You know what I mean? It's
so
I believe the question, right? What's the pushback, or what's the temperature of district? Most people are all for it because the Trump effect still lasts, and all I have to do is show myself as not another politician.
Right.
That's all I have to do. I don't even have to align with Trump. I just have to not be a politician.
So let me ask you this question. I'm sitting here. I'm looking at your website, and you're for living wages. You're for healthcare. You're for paying off student loan, equality, sustainability. You're a supporter of the Green New Deal, which is actually that's the Green Party's platform, and so which I find impressive that you're running for that. And you want universal health care, you want workers' rights and wages, and I'm assuming you're for $15 an hour, and you want to get rid of suffocating student loan debt, because that is the number one thing. I did a video on this. Millennials' student loan debt is 300% more than what baby boomers. It's insane. And how green energy is also used as a national security on your platform, which I would agree with. So let me ask you this question here. If you lose in the primary because the Republican machine is just too big or whatever, will you run against this guy as an independent in the general?
You're not able to. So the way that works is you have to file your independent signatures the day before the primary election.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. Otherwise, the answer would be sure, because I would have a few months to keep my the campaign organization going. So yeah, I absolutely would consider it as far as that goes. And it's just like the Green Party reached out to me. It's like, dude, you could run as the Green Party and guarantee your spot in the general. And I said, you're right. I could. I absolutely could guarantee my spot in the general, but we would lose.
Right.
It's unfortunately, and I feel for the Green Party, especially in Ohio. And we're going off on a tangent here, but I do want to convey my support for the Green Party and their efforts, especially in Ohio, because if they don't get at least 3% of the vote, they lose ballot access permanently. They had to sue the Secretary of State back in 2010, 2011 or something like that, just so they could have ballot access up until the next one or two presidential elections. The Libertarian Party doesn't even have ballot access anymore, and they are the only other major third party out there. So in many ways, I want to help the Green Party get their numbers, but a victory just isn't possible in the state of Ohio unless you're already in an extremely, I don't know. I don't even know what it would take to win as a Green Party candidate, because, again, you're not catering to informed voters, in which case you could possibly win as Green. You're catering to uninformed voters who vote down ticket.
Yeah, and so I'm glad we had this interview, because I didn't understand why, and it makes sense to me. I actually understand why you're doing it, because you're in a highly red district, and if they wouldn't listen to you if you ran as a Democrat or as a Green or as even an independent. They were not even going to listen to you. But you have a 50-50 shot of at least getting them to listen to you because you're running as a Republican. So, I applaud the effort. I'm obviously for way more strict gun. I just want to get rid of all guns, but that's me. I'm a godless hippie.
I thank you for challenging me on that guns thing, because I really wasn't thinking, and I can give excuses left, right, and center, but I had just read about the buyback. It was just like a random article, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. Just completely slipped my mind.
It's all right.
And
I'm not trying to like fry you or whatever, but I'm going to ask. That issue is really close to me. So, I've just seen too many examples of it work to when people suggest that it can't.
But see, that's awesome, because even if we had planned it, like, hey, let's pick a topic I'll disagree with, and then you bring me on board, and then I change my view or whatever. Obviously, I agree with it, so it was just something that slipped my mind. But even so, it shows that as a candidate, I'm willing to listen to people, and that alone, I think, speaks volumes. And it's not that I did that to, blow sunshine up your shirt. I really like that idea. I'm open to great ideas. If my entire platform is idiotic and wrong, and somebody can show me the numbers and prove exactly why, yes, I will change it. People ask me all the time, would you ever sell out? What's your number? What's the cost? I'm like, facts. Like, if you can prove to me that X, Y, and Z needs to change, I'll do it. But no amount of money is going to make me change my belief or my view or my support for this country. I gave up a career. I'm giving up currently a career to do this. Like, yeah, I'm going to sell out for $10,000 to pass a big pharma law. Like, are you nuts?
How can people support you if they want to back? The viewers of this show can go to your website, ronanforcongress.com, and I would suggest to the people who watch this show on a regular basis, especially if you live in this district, I would pay very close attention. But go to your website; it's very clear and upfront about what your platforms are. How can people help or support you if give us how they can support you if they live in your district and if they don't.
Right. So obviously you just gave the website www.ronanforcongress.com, and on that website there's the donation page and the volunteer page. If you're not in the district, please look at the donation and the volunteer page for social media, writing, or phone banking, or of course money helps. And if you're in the district, please ignore the donation page and focus heavily on the volunteer portion, especially the canvassing. Door knocking is what we need. We need that face-to-face. We need that grassroots, and that is exponentially more valuable. Then again, if you are more than happy and able to, and I want to emphasize able to, travel to the state, by all means, door knocking. I have a couch. We have over 8,000 call lists at 50 names apiece. We have plenty to go around. Canvassing, we just turned those 8,000 lists into walk lists. We're golden. There's plenty of work to go around. We have plenty of need and opportunity for you to grow and to be able to get an internship credit. We are partnering right now with the University of Cincinnati and Xavier for internships. This could go all across the country if you are so interested. So please, you can also find me on social media, /Ronan for Congress on Facebook, Ronan, the number 4, Progress on Twitter, and then on YouTube, if you type in Samuel Ronan, you should see my smiling face and look at those videos too.
All right, guys, what you heard, we talk a lot about on this show about getting involved and getting involved on a local level. Sam Ronan is doing it here in Ohio. What is your district number again? Where?
District number 1.
District number 1 in Ohio. And if you live in Ohio and you want to get involved, this is a great way to do it. And also, you don't have to live in Ohio. As he said, you can take donations, you can help out on social media. And, this is an interesting tactic, and it is one that actually makes sense to me now that I've spoken with you. And I applaud your efforts, and I hope anytime we're knocking out incumbents, old corporate incumbents, because there's only... as Ralph Nader said, the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is the speed with which they get on their knees for their corporate benefactors. So,
hey, I can't disagree.
So I applaud you, man, for what you're doing, and thanks for being on the show.
Awesome, brother. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you.